Good evening, TEDxOttawa. How many people woke up happy this morning? How many people woke up healthy? Now, how much of that health and happiness would you attribute to the place where you woke up or the place where you worked, your built environment? Most people look at me somewhat quizzically when I ask that question. And I'll be blunt. The development system, which includes things like land use planning, infrastructure, environmental regulations, and probably most importantly, public engagement, is actually stacked against the things that we know contribute to health, happiness, and a clean environment. And the stats are pretty simple. The Urban Land Institute says that people that live in mixed use, so that means any amenities that you need are in your neighborhood, mixed use, walkable communities with strong transit-oriented links, weigh less, are more active, and have less chronic diseases like diabetes and obesity. And they feel more socially connected with their community. And yet our system forces us almost to do things that we know makes no sense. I'll start with an environmental example. We take water, we chemically treat it. At great energy expense and cost, we pipe it all over our city. To do what with it? Flush our toilets, wash our cars, water our grass. Doesn't make a lot of sense. The system makes it easy to build communities that look like this, the suburbs. Urban sprawl where you need a car to even go get a bag of milk, where you're separated from your neighbors by great distances, and makes it almost impossible to build neighborhoods that look like this, walkable, where the streets are shared by pedestrians, cyclists, and automobiles. And when you live like that, your commute looks like this. You spend a lot of time in your car. I want you to pay careful attention to the HOV lane. Not only are you in your car, but you're alone. And again, the stats on this are very simple. There's a direct correlation between countries where they have a high walking and biking commutership and obesity. And yet our system funnels everything towards that. Now, I think the environmental and health impacts of our built environment might be relatively intuitive. But what about happiness? Well, there are indicators that can clearly tell you how happy someone is. Like how many of their neighbors do they know by first name? And my beliefs are pretty simple. I believe that the places that we live, the places we work, and the places we play should have a positive impact on our health, on our happiness, and on our environment. And I believe the people that make those places, and that includes not only developers, but the politicians, the regulators, the urban planners, need to build communities that actually build community, that make us care. So why aren't we? Well, in my opinion, it's pretty simple. The development system is a process-oriented system, not a goal or an outcome-oriented system. So we end up building what we're allowed to build, not what we all know we should build. But we can change that. All we got to do is break a few rules. And I might be good at that sometimes. Now, I was trained as an engineer, but I've spent my career as an entrepreneur. And almost all of my businesses have been focused in the environmental sector, doing things like cleaning up contaminated sites, recycling hazardous and dangerous wastes, bringing on renewable energy that decreases our dependence on fossil fuels. And most of those sites, or many of those sites, were in urban areas. And we saw downtown, highly lucrative urban sites that were fenced off, locked off, oftentimes for decades. And it caused us, about 10 years ago, to say, why don't we try our hand at property development? Now, I will tell you, I was shocked when I went from being an environmental cleanup contractor, and when you say that at a cocktail party, people say, that's fantastic, to saying, I'm a property developer. And the negative stigma that comes with that. Now, might be somewhat deserved, because there was a property developer that built this. But one of the first things that we did was to set out to break that stigma. We wanted to prove that we could build communities that would actually make the environment better. So we built Canada's first LEED Platinum building. LEED's a rating system that rates how sustainable a building is, with platinum being the ultimate level. Not only did we build Canada's first LEED Platinum building, we built British Columbia's, Alberta's, Ontario's. We actually had a hand in building this theatre, which is LEED Platinum. But we quickly came to realize that while we're having a positive impact on the environment, we weren't necessarily changing people's behaviors. When I saw one of our clients drive their Hummer SUV into the parking lot of our highly sustainable building, I kind of scratched my head. And we started looking for a better way. And we found something called the One Planet Community Framework. One Planet, the name speaks for itself. We have to live like we only have one planet. And again, everyone looks at me with a quizzical look and says, but Jeff, we do only have one planet. And I remind them that if we all live like an American, we need 5 planets. Or a Canadian, we need 4. And all we're doing is stealing from our own grandchildren and the developing world to sustain our unsustainable lifestyle. Now, One Planet is essentially LEED on steroids. And the big difference is it brings in indicators around health, happiness, local economy. So now we tell people, we're going to build communities that not only will make you happier and healthier, but actually improve the environment. And oftentimes they laugh at us. We're getting used to it. And more often than not, the people that laugh the hardest are the very ones responsible for the development system. So, how does, and actually, sorry, the One Planet system, we've coined it, we call it social sustainability. So environmental sustainability is pretty well defined. The social side of it, how do you drive happiness? How do you drive better health from the built environment? Social sustainability. So the question is, how do we use social sustainability and the One Planet system to change the development system? It's pretty simple. We focus on the outcomes. Let me tell you a story. Here, in the heart of the nation's capital, straddling the border between Ontario and Quebec, Ottawa and Gatineau, right between the 2 downtown cores of our cities, sits 37 acres of beautiful waterfront lands. They have unobstructed views of all of our national monuments, Parliament Hill, our Supreme Court, the galleries, the museums, unobstructed views of sunrises and sunsets. Do you want to see them? Beautiful, right? What do you see? Do you see a fenced-off, contaminated site that's going to take years to decontaminate with all of the regulations, straddling the border? Or do you see, as we did, the outcome, the ability to build one of the world's most socially and environmentally sustainable communities? Do you see all of the red tape and regulation that comes with trying to put a development in the middle of the Ottawa River, in Quebec and in Ontario, with all of the cultural implications of that? Or do you see an opportunity to bring all of those communities together to do something truly world-class, as we did? Now, the complexity of this site can't be understated. We sit half in Gatineau, half in Ottawa, half in the province of Quebec, the founding French province of Canada, and half in Ontario, the founding English province of Canada. We have federal oversight, and we sit in the heart of Algonquin traditional territory, First Nations. And I often say, to have a successful development here is pretty simple. All we have to do is to get Canada's 3 founding nations to cooperate and collaborate. But we did it. And how did we do it? Well, let me explain. Not only did we do it, but we've been recognized internationally for what we've done. This project won the Best Master Plan from the Canadian Planning Institute. Went on to win from the North American Planning Institute, and in Durban, South Africa last year, the community won the Best Master Plan Community on the planet. So how did we do it? Well, we started by getting curious. When we looked at the lands, we wanted to know what communities are involved in these lands. What is it that they're looking to see out of the lands? And we're now blessed with some fantastic new friends. I have some great Quebecois friends that I have to constantly apologize for my poor French. Some fantastic Algonquin friends who took us under their wings, taught us their language, their culture, explained to us how things work. And our curiosity kept driving us to say, how do we make sure that when we build a community, everybody from our community feels like they have a sense of place? And most importantly, we do it in a way that will drive happiness, health, and a clean environment. So we started engagement, lots of it, literally hundreds of engagements. And one of the things that we decided to do was we hosted a major, non-mandatory. Now I want you to think about how most property developers would think about public engagements, kind of like dental surgery. We hosted a non-mandatory public meeting at one of the local museums. We had 1,000 people show up. And if we had a criticism from that, it was, you didn't show us what you were going to build. And we said, well, that's the purpose of the engagement. We actually want to know what you think we should build. And most public consultations around development look something like this. They're not a lot of fun, I can tell you. Ours look like this. And the headline the next day talked about enthusiasm around the development. And the outcome we had was a social contract. Let me explain what a social contract is. Social contract is an agreement between us and all of the communities we engage with to do certain things. We came up with 8 development principles. We called them our 8 commandments. And don't remind me, I know there's actually 10 commandments, but these are our 8 commandments. They included things like building a world-class sustainable community, making sure that Canada's 3 founding nations were represented, not only protecting but enhancing views, and I think most importantly, opening up this magnificent waterfront site to the citizens of this region for the first time in 200 years. And those 8 commandments guided us through everything we did and allowed us to start challenging the system, overcoming barriers. And where did we start? We started with politicians. We said, very simply, we have a contract to build a world-class community. That means different. Your bureaucracies are set up to enforce the same, all of the rules. You need to allow your bureaucrats to ask themselves, is this the right thing to do? And if it is, how do we do it? And we got the City of Gatineau, the City of Ottawa, the National Capital Commission, and the First Nations together in the same room to talk about this. I don't think that's ever happened before in this region. And what was the outcome? Mayor of Ottawa says he's going to roll out the red carpet, not red tape. The Mayor of Gatineau says this is a must-not-miss opportunity. The national leader of our First Nations talks about unprecedented dialogue between us and the First Nations. And that allowed us to really start breaking some rules. We were able to go to the bureaucrats and challenge them to say, again, world-class means different. Just because we keep doing the same thing over and over again doesn't make it right. We do not believe we're doing the right thing for people's health, for people's happiness, and for the environment. So let me give you a few examples, and there's a lot of them. I got to keep them relatively short. There's 5 interprovincial bridges in our region. All of them are heavily trafficked commuter bridges. The one that runs through our site, the Chaudière Bridge, is probably the least pedestrian-friendly crossing in the area. Anybody that's walked across that bridge or ridden across it, it's a terror show. The sidewalk doesn't even follow the whole side of the street on one side. But by engaging with traffic engineers of all people, what was the outcome? We took something that currently looks like this, a 4-lane highway, and we now have agreement to make it look like this. This will be the most pedestrian-friendly crossing in our region. And what's important is we're able to do it in a way that is not going to impact the amount of cars that can get across the bridge through redesign. Leading with pedestrian-friendly, leading with cycling-friendly. We were able to do something that we were told was impossible. We didn't think it was really that big a deal, but we wanted to take things that look like this and turn them into streets that look like this, where pedestrians, cyclists, and cars are all together. And if you're on your feet, you rule the roost. And a cyclist will wind through, and if you're in a car, you're welcome, but you're a third-class citizen making your way through. We were told we couldn't do it. City bylaws do not allow that. Well, we broke that rule. We did it by saying, maybe we just own the streets in perpetuity and we'll prove that you can maintain them and manage them and set a model for what should happen next to make walkable, pedestrian, friendly streets. Another barrier we broke, one of the ones I'm most proud of, is the Quebec construction industry is very difficult to work in. And if you're a First Nations worker, it's even more so, because oftentimes you spend time working on the reserve. You could be a carpenter for 20 years on the reserve, but because it's federal land, none of your experience is recognized in the province. So we started 3 years ago saying, we want to see First Nations workers on our site. We were told the way the unions work, the way the bassins work, it can't happen. Well, we broke that rule too. We worked with the regulators, and here's the first crew. Here's the first crew on our site. Doing the site decontamination, 70% Algonquin workers. Truly unbelievable. Not only we got construction work with the First Nations, we called the site Zibi, which is Algonquin for river. And one of the things I love about that is when I say the site is called Zibi, people say, why Zibi? I say, because it's the Algonquin word for river. And they say, why Algonquin? I said, because this is their territory. They are our hosts. So another barrier broken. Another one that we're really proud of is we are building our region's, and one of the few in North America, zero carbon district energy system. What that means is all of the heating, cooling, and electrification on our site will be zero carbon. Most developments hook onto the natural gas pipeline, connect to what is a pretty dirty grid, and that's all they do. And we continue our carbon dependency. Now, you might know utilities in this part of the world are pretty heavily regulated. When we first met with the local hydro distribution company and we said we want to run our own utility, they made it pretty clear. If you do that, we are going to war. Well, I'm happy to say, if we go to war, they're now my partner. They are a 50-50 partner in our first zero carbon district energy system in the region. So, we can do better. It's clear we can do better. And all of us have a responsibility, in my opinion, to challenge the system and demand that we want places that we know, the data's evidence, we know improve health, happiness, and our environment. In 10 years' time, when I'm sitting on a waterfront patio, looking at Parliament Hill, or watching the sunset, in the world's most sustainable community, I'll know that not only did we break a few barriers, maybe even a few rules to make it happen, but we set a model for how it can be done. Miigwech, thank you, merci. Be happy.